When we think Unit 3, your immediate thoughts should be one word: trade. It was filled with trade over deserts, water, and jungles that interconnected the Old World, at least, for the first time in history. New cities based on these trade routes began to evolve, including Calicut, Baghdad, Malacca, Timbuktu, and Novgorod, all benefited from this trade. Goods traded along these routes were typically luxury products like silk, porcelain, spices, cotton, and gems unique to the area they originated. Essentially, this type of trade purely fluctuated on supply and demand as none of these products were necessary for survival. As trade increased, so did technology to make it faster and more efficient, from China's contribution of the astrolabe and compass to the life-changing camel saddle in the Saharan desert. Technology was key. Plus, once everybody involved seemed to have been captured by the Mongols, trade was made even easier as you no longer needed to cross into foreign lands. Not only products, but ideas and philosophies were also indirectly carried along these trade routes. Bantu and Polynesian migrations were critical in spreading languages and ethnic homogeneity to their regions. At this time in history, Swahili, Turkic, and Arabic were the top primary languages spoken along these routes. Speaking of Arabic, the world's most universalizing religion was also born in this time period in 623 with Muhammad's life and teachings. Broken into two sects after his death, Islam was very popular along these trade routes both through military and trade relations. Islam did have a political standhold with two caliphates rising up, the Umayyads and the Abbasids. They were led by Islamic caliphs and reigned basically from its birth until 1258 when the Mongols sacked Baghdad. Umayyads were the first, and while they expanded the most, political instability and financial woes did them in as they collapsed in 750 to the Abbasids. The Abbasids were known as the Golden Age for Islam. Being more compacted and politically sound, the Abbasids had great military and financial success and lasted almost 500 years. They infused their Persian ideology into many places and ultimately made Islam. Three major people that were vastly important to the cross-cultural interactions were Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, and Zhang Zhang. Each traveled across the routes as merchants trying to soak up as much as they could about each culture they encountered, like Polo's time on the Chinese official board and Ibn Battuta's encounters with West African kingdoms. On the flip side, Europe was deeply conflicting with religion and the bubonic plague. Tensions in the Christian church reached an all-time high, ending with the Great Sikhism in 1054 between Eastern Orthodox and Catholics. Europe was plagued with the worst epidemic in history, wiping out one-third of its prior population. Western Europe slowly declined into a feudal state similar to Japan, where those who have land share it with peasants for money in an endless cycle of poverty for those at the bottom. Eastern Europe, however, benefited from its location in relation to the Middle East and were able to set up the new Rome, called the Byzantine Empire. Taking the throne in 527, their most renowned leader, Justinian, enforced Roman laws on the people and led them to a time of economic flourish. Constantinople was the hub for trade in their empire and was one of the richest cities in the world until it was overrun by the Ottomans in 1453. What makes the Byzantine Empire unique from the other European ones in history is that it was based on Roman and Eastern Orthodox principles, not Catholic. It would be unjust, though, to go this entire unit without mentioning the Mongols or the Chinese. The Mongols were probably the most critical piece to the puzzle that is Unit 3, as they were unpredicted and did the most on a historic scale. Led by their all-powerful leader Genghis Khan, these Central Asian nomads conquered all the way from the gates of Vienna to Guangzhou. The lands they conquered were religiously and economically tolerant, so trade and religion went along almost untouched. In fact, it increased trade since taxes didn't exist within their empire. They were also organized into four khanates, each run by a different descendant of Genghis. Their prize jewel, though, was China. It was run by Genghis's grandson, Kublai Khan, and for the most part, he was a solid leader. He did his best to conform to the people and even initiated a Chinese board of officials to command with him, but it wasn't enough. China felt the Mongols were inferior and did everything they could to overthrow the Yuan dynasty and cleanse China once again. Before the Mongols, though, China had experienced great success with the Sui, Tang, and Song dynasties. Sui was vital for ending the War of Warring States and restoring the Mandate of Heaven and the Grand Canal. The Tang was the new Han, and was very open to trade with the outside world that included voyages by the none other than Zhang He. They ultimately closed their doors as a result of too much diversity to its population and the rise of Buddhism opposing Confucian values. The song was split in half, but was a very artistic time period focusing on improving oneself and embracing Confucian ideologies. A critical historic invention that occurred during the song was gunpowder, the single reason why Europe came to power like it is today. Overall, societies began to urbanize and abandon subsistence farming thanks to agricultural developments like champa rice, terrace farming, and the horse collar. Since was more food, more people came too, and world population spiked. Socially, outcasts like nomads and peasants were able to fight their way forward and close the poverty gap in much of the world outside of Western Europe. Unit 3 is just the paving the way for Unit 4.